Welcome to Black Sheep, where I take a look at entries in video game franchises that were poorly received or controversial among the fans. Now, I won't be dwelling on the negative aspects of these games. Instead, I'll be looking in detail at things I like about the games, whether it was the story, gameplay, music, or anything else it contained, and see if they're really deserving of the infamy that they have. For this episode, we will be looking at Duke Nukem Forever. Despite not having many entries in its main franchise, the Duke Nukem series has been around for a good while. The first Duke Nukem game made its debut on the PC in 1991, and was followed by a sequel 2 years later. The first two games in the Duke Nukem series were 2D platformers. Players controlled Duke across several side-scrolling levels, performing jumps, shooting enemies, and collecting points for a high score in each stage. In 1996, the series received its most popular entry with Duke Nukem 3D. Duke Nukem 3D changed the course of the series with its first-person shooter elements, and the game is beloved by many gamers even to this day. Not only was the gameplay overhauled, but the character of Duke as well. Duke Nukem became the character many are now familiar with, spouting one-liners, references from films, and just an all-around homage to macho action stars from the 1980s. The success of Duke Nukem 3D made developer 3D Realms immediately begin work on the next title in the series, titled Duke Nukem Forever. With the announcement of Duke Nukem Forever in 1997, gamers were looking forward to Duke's next adventure. Fast forward to 2001, and despite seeing screenshots and trailers of the game, there was still no release date. After 8 more years of silence, Duke was shown in an all-new trailer, but once again the game was delayed. In 2009, 3D Realms was considerably downsized by publisher 2K Games, and it looked like this was the end for Duke. But 1 year later, Gearbox Software announced that the reins of the project had passed to them, and they intended to finish it. After being constantly reworked, passing through 4 different development studios, and a total of 15 years of development, Duke Nukem was finally released to the world on June 2011. With more than a decade having passed since its initial announcement, many people believed that Duke's 4th main game would never be released. Also, many were concerned that the game would never live up to 15 years of anticipation. As for myself, despite never really being a fan of Duke Nukem, there was something about the long-awaited release of Duke Nukem Forever that made me want to check it out. So let's start out by looking at the game's story. 12 years have passed since the events of Duke Nukem 3D. Duke is a national hero for stopping the alien invasion, and is now living a life of luxury in Las Vegas. While making his rounds in the Lady Killer Hotel and Casino, Duke and the rest of the world are shocked to see that the alien fleet has returned, but they seem strangely passive. Unfortunately, it is all a ruse, and the aliens make their true intentions known by capturing all the women of the city.
Duke, help! Oh God, Duke, save us!
Not my babes, not in my town! You alien f***ers are gonna pay for this!
Duke, along with the Earth Defense Force, fight back against the alien invaders, and the first part of the game has players trying to reach the alien hive. Upon reaching the alien hive, the game takes a very dark and very jarring tonal shift. Gone is the humor from the previous sections, as you are subjected to a disturbing revelation.
Duke, it was our first time. With an alien. Duke, we'll get the weight off in like a week, we swear!
Even though I enjoy the campaign of Duke Nukem Forever overall, I will point out that I really do not enjoy the Hive stage, as well as the strip club dream sequence that follows it. Thankfully, the story picks up again during the Duke Burger stage, as Duke begins heading towards the Hoover Dam, where the aliens have made a portal connecting their world and Earth. After battling across the desert, Duke arrives at the dam and blows up the foundation, destabilizing the portal. The President shows up to rage at Duke, who he blames for ruining everything, as you learn that the President was partially responsible for the alien invasion and just wanted more power. After one final battle against the Cycloid Emperor, the game ends with Duke Nukem being caught in the blast zone of a nuclear bomb and stating,
What kind of ending is that? I ain't dead. I'm coming back for more.
After the credits, there is one final scene where a very much alive Duke says that his next goal is to become the President of the United States. The story of Duke Nukem Forever is a fun, albeit crude and inconsistent ride. A lot of your enjoyment of the story is dependent on the character of Duke himself. He's still a walking, talking parody of 80s action stars, and is very selfish in his attitudes, and has a less than respectable view on women. That being said, there's still something I find enjoyable about playing as Duke, and I think most of it comes down to his quips and references. There are still some of his more classic lines like,
Step right up and get some.
But Forever also includes some more modern lines like,
America, yeah.
Not all of the jokes land, but the ones that do made me chuckle, and the game isn't above poking fun at itself either.
What about the game, Duke? Was it any good?
Yeah, but after 12 years, it should be.
The humor is generally a bit too crude for my tastes, but it does fit the character of Duke to a T.
Duke, we've got your green power armor over here and ready to go.
Power armor is for
Well, okay. You want a gun instead?
Like the character of Duke, the gameplay of Duke Nukem Forever is a hodgepodge of first-person shooter elements from the last decade. The first half of the game is more akin to shooters from the 90s, with its jump pads, puzzle solving, and platforming sequences. The second half of the game, on the other hand, plays a bit more like modern shooters and contains lengthy vehicle sections in the Mighty Foot. Duke also borrows elements from popular shooters like Halo and Call of Duty with his 2-gun limit and regenerating health bar. While I've always preferred more traditional health systems in first-person shooters, I like how you can increase Duke's ego meter by performing actions with the environments in the game. Actions like lifting weights, eating popcorn, and looking at calendar girls can increase Duke's ego, thus allowing you to take more damage as the game progresses. It's a very neat system and fits the character of Duke extremely well. I like how it's his ego that protects him during the game's battles. Despite being more limited in the firearms Duke can carry, the guns of Duke Nukem Forever are fun and satisfying to use. There's your standard first-person shooter weapons like pistols, shotguns, and assault rifles, but this game also boasts some unique and very enjoyable weapons like the Shrink Ray and Freeze Gun. Shrinking an attacking alien and then stomping him is good fun, and combined with your pipe bombs and trip mines, you can deal a great amount of damage to the game's enemies. Like in Duke Nukem 3D, you face off against several different types of aliens. You battle jetpack aliens, pig cops, octobrains, and all sorts of wacky alien life forms. The game also includes several boss fights, and the bosses in this game can only be defeated by using explosive weapons like the rocket launcher. In this sense, the bosses can feel a little samey, but I enjoyed some of the game's boss fights, and the final battle against the Cycloid Emperor can be pretty challenging. To help you in the game's fights, you have access to 4 different items. Duke Vision allows you to see in the dark, and there are several parts in the game where this is a necessity to progress. Drinking beer makes Duke more resilient to damage, but it unfortunately obscures your vision as well. I guess Duke's a lightweight. Who knew? Taking steroids makes Duke defeat enemies with just 1 punch, and makes you move quite quickly. The final item to help you is the Hollow Duke, which is extremely helpful as it makes a double of you that enemies will attack. It lasts a decent amount of time and is super hilarious when it imitates Duke's one-liners. The item pickups aren't very frequent, so I generally found it best to save them for the game's more challenging fights. As I mentioned before, Duke Nukem Forever has a good deal of platforming, particularly in the first few hours of the game. Platforming was more prevalent in the FPS games of the 90s and early 2000s, and it's something that was pretty much abandoned in more modern shooters. I, however, really enjoyed the platforming sequences in Duke Nukem Forever. My personal favorite is when you've been shrunk down and must traverse the kitchen of Duke Burger without falling into the flooded floor below. Actually, the whole Duke Burger level is one of the highlights of the game, as you have shootouts in between jars of sauce and have a fun battle on the restaurant's rooftop. With the exception of the Hive and the Strip Club Dream sequence, I enjoyed the levels of Duke Nukem Forever as a whole. Fighting in the streets of Las Vegas is pretty neat, and driving across the desert in the Mighty Foot is very fun. The campaign of Duke Nukem Forever can actually be seen as an evolution of the first-person shooter as a whole. There are many elements of the entire FPS genre in this game, and that can either make your experience more or less enjoyable depending on your preference. Overall, I would say I enjoyed Duke Nukem Forever. While I don't really like the more crass parts of the game, the actual gunplay, platforming, and puzzle solving was quite enjoyable. I must also add that I found the soundtrack entertaining too. Particularly the main theme. I never got tired of it. So what makes Duke Nukem Forever a black sheep? The game was criticized upon release for its dated elements. The graphics weren't up to the standards set by other games of 2011, and Duke's character was seen as behind the times. Additionally, the console versions of the game suffered from lengthy loading screens. A lot of players felt that Duke Nukem Forever didn't reach the same level of quality as modern shooters, and the multiplayer elements of the game lacked the popular progression systems of today's multiplayer shooters. More so than anything, however, most critics and gamers just felt that Duke Nukem Forever did not live up to 15 years of anticipation. To be fair though, I don't think any game could live up to an extended period of hype. In the last few years, certain games like Watch Dogs, Destiny, and even more recently No Man's Sky have had astronomical amounts of hype surrounding them, and for some people, those expectations can't be met. Even if Duke Nukem Forever turned out to be the absolute best shooter to ever come out, there would still be those who wouldn't be happy with it because a decade of anticipation can create unreal expectation. Please know that I'm not bashing anyone for not liking Duke Nukem Forever. Truthfully, I can completely understand why many people don't enjoy it, and as I've said myself, there are parts of the game I'm not overly fond of. However, I am glad that Duke Nukem Forever finally got released. The folks at 3D Realms, as well as the other studios involved, put a lot of hard work into making Duke's next big adventure. Sure, there were some questionable design decisions, and maybe the project should have been more locked down instead of them constantly reworking the game, but I'm happy that the developers at least got to finally finish the darn thing. To be honest, I had no real interest in the Duke Nukem series until Duke Nukem Forever came out in 2011. But having played this game, I would be interested in playing a sequel if another game ever comes out. Officially, Gearbox Software and 2K Games still own the IP, so it's entirely possible that we may someday see the Duke return. Hopefully next time, the developers will be able to tailor a more consistent experience for the game, as well as exploring and possibly reimagining the character of Duke Nukem. Duke's return is still a bit uncertain at this time, but I'd like to see him make a proper comeback, as he is a gaming character that many people love. And maybe next time we won't have to wait forever for his next adventure.
You fucking amateur! Are you kidding me? I'm trying to do a scene with Johnny on the show, and there you are wandering through the set! You never stop to wonder if it might be distracting with you walking through? Do you want me to trash your mics? Would you like me to trash your mics? You don't f***ing get it!
Oh, thanks, Duke.
Thank you for watching this episode of Black Sheep. What are your thoughts on Duke Nukem Forever? Any other Black Sheep games you want me to take a look at? Feel free to share in the comments below. Until next time, keep having great adventures, everyone.